Good morning. I guess is it afternoon? We just struck noon. My name is Andrew Woods. I am the director of the Center for Business and Economic Research right here at the UNLV Lee Business School. And I want to thank all of you for being here today for our 2021 end-of-year outlook. And certainly, I also want to thank all of our sponsors who have supported us through the years and is supporting us for the 2021 outlook. Without them, we would not be able to continue or really do what we do when it comes to helping business, government, the public at large, really understand and utilize the benefits of economic research, as well as go out and help solve problems in the community when it comes to these various issues and areas. So, because of them, we're able to continue to do that good research that we've been doing for 45 years as a center, and also, most importantly, get our students involved in this and give them real-world applications to solving problems using economics. So because of your support, we're able to continue doing that, so please give a round of applause to all our sponsors. I also want to acknowledge the elected officials either attending today online or in person, or will be attending at some point here before the end of the conference. So Senator Cortez Masto will be tuning in here and speaking later on. We also have a representative from Senator Jackie Rosen. Secretary Barbara Sagaski is watching online. State Treasurer Zach Conine will be here a little bit later and join us for a panel. Commissioner Jones, Justin Jones is here. Mayor Deborah March is watching online. Councilman Knutson going to be attending here in a few minutes when he gets here. And then we have Regents McAdoo, Carter, and Perkins watching online as well. Can we all give them a round of applause, please? So again, I am the director of CBER, the Center for Business and Economic Research. I have been officially the director since June 1st of this year, which in that time we have made a lot of movement and momentum with this center, getting it back out in the community. And right now is certainly a interesting time for all of us, full of opportunities and challenges. But for me, I personally see it as a very exciting time to get back out there and really get the tools and benefits of economics out in the community solving problems. So how many of you have seen headlines like these? Arizona economy reaches 95% recovery of pandemic lost jobs. Or Intel to spend $20 billion to build a new chip plant in Arizona. Or Taiwanese chip maker plans to build $12 billion factory in Arizona. Raise your hand if you've seen headlines like those. Okay. What about headlines like these? Population to grow by 1 million over the next 40 years, UNLV report says. Or Las Vegas area to reach 3.4 million residents by 2060. Anyone ever seen headlines like those? Raise your hand. Yeah, so we got a good, both people are reading the news these days, good. So CBER is about the future, and today's conference is about the future. Not just 1 to 2 years in the future, but we also look at things going on in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years for Southern Nevada. And that's what I want you to take away from this conference or from our outlook, is that this is going to be a discussion on the future. And again, it's not just the short term, but the long term. And that starts with population growth. So the red bar at the top, that is currently how many residents live in Clark County as we speak, which is roughly around 2.3 million. The blue bar, from the second from the bottom, is the current population for the entire state. To put this in perspective, in 1950, 3 in every 10 Nevadans lived in Southern Nevada. Today, it's 3 in 4. And we predict by 2040, it will be 4 in 5, or roughly 80% of the population will live right here in Southern Nevada, based on CBER's research that we've been doing for decades in terms of the population forecast. That means that there's about 117 new people residing in Southern Nevada every day, or by the time that this outlook is over at 3 p.m., 15 more people will be residing in Southern Nevada. That's how quickly our population is growing. So, if we were to hop in a CBER DeLorean and go 40 years in the future, what is our community going to look like? What are the jobs of the future? What are the education, the healthcare, the housing, all of that look like as we move forward? And that's where CBER really is here to help to bring those economic benefits to our businesses, to our government leaders, to our community leaders, nonprofits, the public at large. We really want to start thinking and talking about the future, not just what you're going to hear today for the next year or two, but for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years. So let's gun it to 88 miles per hour and start having a short conversation here about the future as the way CBER is looking at it. First of all, we are changing as a community, and our diversity is our strength. Simply, as we saw with the 2020 census, we are one of the most diverse states in the entire country. Our community here in Southern Nevada is one of the most diverse communities in the entire country. That is an incredible strength, and the rest of the country is looking to us as we change. What are we doing to make sure people have jobs, quality of life, education, etc.? And that comes here also at the university, which is, once again, ranked as the top most diverse university in the entire country. We are the face of America, and we're training the face of America. And at CBER, when we put our students on projects that help them do real-world research, we are training them to be ready to tackle those challenges in the future. So that's one opportunity for us as we look to the future. Second, the headlines in the census, as we saw from 2020, is that America is getting older. But here in Southern Nevada, we're still bucking that trend, along with Maricopa, which is Phoenix, and Salt Lake. And you can see, too, as Southern Nevada is also younger than the rest of the state. This is median age. So, again, second opportunity. Not only do we diverse, but we're also younger than the rest of the nation. We've also made a lot of progress when it comes to education at all levels, just in the last 10 years, as you can see from educational attainment just here in Clark County. To put this in perspective, in 1990, only 15% of residents in Southern Nevada had a bachelor's degree. Today, it's 24%. So we've grown, we've gotten better at it, helping folks get an education. But as you all kind of probably suspect, when you look at our regional competitors, I like to call them regional competitors, across the state line in Arizona or in Salt Lake, they too have made gains, and they've made big gains. And so just looking at this, the black bar is Clark County, the gray bar is the US median average, or educational attainment average, and then the bars to the right are Maricopa and Salt Lake. So we've grown, or been able to get bachelor's degree attainment rate up by 9.7%, but in the United States, they've gone up by 16.3% over the same time frame. In Maricopa, it's 10.6, and then in Salt Lake, it's 11%. And as you probably figure, education is tied to income. And as you can see, while the country has gotten richer, and our neighbors have gotten richer, and even the state as a whole has done better on wages, in Clark County, we haven't kept up. So this chart is from our friends from GoEd who are in the room, and these are the top jobs of the future here in the state of Nevada that they forecast. We can list them off, right? Construction makes sense. We've got a lot of building going on. We've got an infrastructure bill. It means even more building is coming to Southern Nevada. We have healthcare and social assistance, makes sense. Transportation and warehousing. We also have administrative support and professional, scientific, and technical skills. Question for you, what is not on this graph? Think about it. So at CBER, we're really trying to be not just point out what's going on, but how do we help and be a part of the solution in terms of working with our business community, our leaders and our nonprofits here in the public, and achieve the benefits of economic research. A lot of this has to do is because we, since I took over, want to say more, do more, and be more. The first way that starts is with partnerships. We are working hard to get back out in the community and work with, again, with our businesses, with our industry leaders, with our nonprofits to help them solve problems right here in our backyard. The second is, and this has not been made public yet, but internally in the university, they have announced it. We're now working with the Office of Economic Development here at the university, as well as with the Governor's Office Economic Development, with Nevada Knowledge Fund dollars to create the Applied Research Collaborative, which is to help build more partnerships between the university, the business school, and with private industry to create more intellectual property. And we will be rolling out more of those details. But this is a really exciting time for UNLV. There's a lot of good work happening among our academia, and our goal is to help build that bridge with private industry so that they see that value and they want to come work with us. Does anyone know who this is on the screen, by the way? This is Ashkan Salamat. He is a physics professor here, and he invented room temperature superconductivity along with a team of researchers at University of Rochester. If you ever talk to Beau Bernard, he will talk about Ash all day long and how amazing this is and how incredible this is as an opportunity. There are top 5 companies around the world, global companies, that were trying to do what he did, but he did it here at UNLV. And that's the excitement we have that's going on campus and how we're building those bridges and how CBER is ready to play our small but helpful role in this. The third thing that's not public, but we are announcing today as well, is that we are starting an online micro-credential in economics for public school teachers in Clark County. This was part of a legislation that was passed by our leaders in Carson City about 4.5 years ago, and it was required to teach economics as part of civics. Turns out there's not a lot of teachers that met that requirement, and so working with the Nevada Department of Education, and because of funding from private foundation donors, we are going to launch a pilot in the spring with our Department of Economics, with our online education learning, with our College of Education and the Nevada State Department of Education to help get fast-track all our Clark County teachers so that they get educated in economics. So as you can see, those are 3 ways that CBER is already, in my short time here, working to get back out there in the community and be helpful in terms of spreading, again, the knowledge and the goodwill that we are trying to build with the community to get back out there as we come out of the pandemic. So again, let's jump in our CBER DeLorean, gun it to 88 miles per hour. In the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what kind of community are we going to be? Are we going to be a utopia of, affordable health care, of high quality of life, good jobs, entrepreneurs, a growing economy? We can do this. I promise you we can do this. We've done this before. We've been here before. How do I know? Because we've got the Golden Knights. I'm going to the Stanley Cup multiple times. I want to say even, maybe 2022 championship winner, Golden Knights. We know from the 1990 Running Rebels and winning that national championship. And we know from our Las Vegas Raiders Monday Night Football comeback, amazing victory on that. We've been here before. If we work together, we commit, we have a vision, we can grow this community and make it stronger and better and a lot more economically prosperous. Ideas can change the world, but it takes a rebel to make it happen. So speaking of rebels, I have the honor of introducing our distinguished president, esteemed president, Dr. Keith Whitfield. Would you come up here and say a few words?
Thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon. Oh my gosh, that's anemic. Isn't it great to be here, Thomas and Mack, looking out over the strip, thinking about economic futures? So you got to have more excitement than that, so just give me a little something. Good afternoon. I hate it when I have to do it the second time because I know you could have done it the first time. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you have that enthusiasm because I think you have a very exciting day ahead of you. So thank you very much for inviting me to be able to say a few words on behalf of UNLV and the honor of introducing U.S. Secretary Treasury Janet Yellen. CBER's Outlook formula plays an important role in how we're preparing both community and business leaders in our students. They've got to know what's going to come ahead of them. So activities like this are critically important. It's important to be able to provide economic perspectives that are needed now more than ever before. We have shown tremendous resilience as a university and also patience at the same time in navigating this pandemic over the last, are we counting months anymore? Let's just say 2 years. My hope is today bring some clarity and focus to help each of you create a map of success for your organization. As you analyze economic data and forecasts at this summit and somehow figure out how it will impact the decisions that we need to make in the coming year, I want you to keep something in mind. I want you to keep in mind that UNLV is actually here to support you. Oftentimes, I think this university has been thought of as an add-on, an ivory tower, something that just kind of is in our environment but not of our environment. Couldn't be more wrong. Two of our core principles at UNLV are economic development and community partnerships. We understand the role that we have in stimulating economic development for the state and for the region. That's one of the many reasons why we're so excited to host this event today. It's also the reason why we've developed the UNLV Blackfire Innovation at the Harry Reid Research and Technology Park, and also created the Incubator at the Howard Hughes Center, both designed to foster economic activity and new business ideas. And if you have not met Bo Bernhard, you're missing a show, because what he will demonstrate to you is that UNLV is one of those economic drivers that we need to be able to both diversify and return economic prosperity to our region, particularly to our city. The economic impact of UNLV is currently more than $2.5 billion annually, and the university is ranked as one of the top 3% of higher education institutions in the country. And of course, we're ranked as one of the most diverse campuses, as Andrew mentioned, in the country. What do those two things mean when you put them together? It means that you have a strong, diverse workforce that's going to be able to provide not only somebody putting the round pegs in the round holes, but being able to think through the kinds of problems that you will have to solve and that you'll face. These characteristics demonstrate the benefits of partnering with UNLV and how we can work together with private industry and the state to further generate economic development and diversity in our workforce. So now let me introduce our distinguished guest and our keynote speaker of the 2021 Center for Business and Economic Research Outlook Conference. She is U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. She is the 78th Secretary of the Treasury and the first woman to hold the appointment. Prior to her role as Treasury Secretary, she served as the first chairwoman of the Federal Reserve. In terms of her education, it's the foundation of her very, very distinguished career. Janet Louise Yellen was born in Brooklyn and the daughter of an elementary school teacher and a physician. In 1967, Secretary Yellen graduated from Brown University and went on to earn her PhD at Yale. She was an assistant professor at Harvard until 1976, when she began working at the Federal Reserve Board. In 1980, Secretary Yellen joined the faculty of the University of California, Berkeley, where she became the Eugene E. and Catherine M. Treflin Professor of Business and a Professor of Economics. She today still holds the rank of Professor Emeritus at that university. Secretary Yellen's research and scholarly activity is focused on a range of issues pertaining to labor and macroeconomics. Her work on efficiency wages with her husband, George Akeroff, studies why firms often choose to pay more than the minimum wage to hire employees. These businesses, they found, are often making wise decisions. Firms that offer better pay and working conditions tend to be rewarded with higher morale, reduced turnover, and greater productivity. In 1994, President Bill Clinton appointed Dr. Yellen to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. 3 years later, he named her the chair of the White House Council on Economic Advisors. In 2004, Secretary Yellen began her third tenure at the Federal Reserve, this time as the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. From that post, she spotted a worrying economic trend, a bubble in home values. When the housing bubble burst in 2008, Secretary Yellen helped manage the resulting financial crisis and recession. In 2010, Barack Obama appointed her vice chair of the Federal Reserve before nominating her to succeed Chairman Ben Bernanke as the nation's top central banker, where she served from 2014 to 2018. While she couldn't be with us here today, because of her schedule, which included business travel to meet with foreign business leaders, she recorded remarks for us last night and answered some very important questions from our faculty, students, and the community at large. If you would, please join me in giving Secretary Yellen a warm welcome to our conference today.
Hello, everyone. This is Janet Yellen, and I want to thank UNLV for the chance to share a few thoughts today. I also want to thank the economics faculty, students, and other members of the UNLV community for sending along some very smart questions. I'm going to try to answer a few of them in my remarks today. But first I have to say, your timing for this Outlook conference is quite good. The past 2 weeks have been momentous for fiscal policy making, easily the most consequential weeks in recent memory. On Friday night, Congress rendered a final and favorable vote on President Biden's infrastructure bill, which will soon be signed into law. This kind of infrastructure bill, something on the scale of the project to build the interstate highway system, has been the ambition of lawmakers for a long, long time. And now it's finally happened. Then there's a second piece of legislation following close behind the infrastructure bill, the so-called reconciliation bill. This is the one that includes investments in childcare, in education, and in sustainability. The House is on track to pass it later this month before the Senate takes it up. Of course, anything can happen. No legislation is final until the ink of the president's signature is drying on the paper. But I'm optimistic, and I think it's worth beginning to place this pair of laws into its proper historical context. History really is the right word. I've been involved in economic policy making for nearly 50 years, and I've seen many people compare many legislative proposals to the New Deal and the Great Society. But nothing has come as close as these two pieces of legislation, which we collectively refer to as President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. Build Back Better is on a par with past groundbreaking legislation for how significantly it will grow the economy, for how directly it will impact the everyday lives of working Americans, lowering costs and cutting taxes for them, and for the number of ways that it does these things. In fact, if you were to parse through and unpack both pieces of legislation, you'd find at least 5 history-making measures in their own right, the kind that only happen once every few decades, and in some cases, once every century. That's what I want to talk about today. I can't cover every aspect of the twin bills in our limited time together. But I do want to spend a few minutes going through each of those 5 historic measures and what they mean for our medium and long-term economic outlook, as well as talking about how these measures are fully paid for. First, let's talk about what happened on Friday night. Build Back Better is the biggest investment in American infrastructure since Eisenhower built the interstate highway system. There's a somewhat famous historical anecdote about a 28-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Dwight Eisenhower and how he participated in one of the first cross-country road trips. This was 1919. An Army convoy left Washington, D.C. on July 7th. It reached San Francisco 62 days later, in mid-September, during which time various vehicles broke down along dirt roads, collapsed wooden bridges, and had to be towed by horses. It impressed upon the young Eisenhower that a modern economy could never be built with the current infrastructure, and it made him see, as he later wrote in his autobiography, the wisdom of broader ribbons of road across the land. Well, we have lived our own version of Eisenhower's cross-country trip during the past 20 months. The pandemic has shown us that our current infrastructure is not fit for a modern economy. One of the more memorable articles I read during the pandemic was about students from Orem, North Carolina, who would regularly drive to a McDonald's parking lot. They'd go there to do their classwork because they were some of the millions of Americans who can't access high-speed broadband at home. And McDonald's was the nearest place with Wi-Fi. Well, remote work and study aren't going away after the pandemic. The internet is now a crucial public utility, essential for success in American life, and an economy where fast food chains are the best providers of that utility is not a healthy economy. High-speed internet has to be a public good, and that's what Build Back Better makes it. The law funds a nationwide project to connect every home to broadband. There's ongoing debate over what qualifies as infrastructure. I won't wade into that here, except to say that broadband unequivocally qualifies, as do investments in transit and supply chains, ports and airports, and all of those are included in the bill that passed on Friday. America's businesses will find it much easier to connect with markets abroad. Build Back Better is also the most significant improvement in 60 years in how we care for people in this country, especially children. Today, roughly half of Americans live in child care deserts, areas where there's only one daycare spot for every 3 kids. The child centers that do exist are often in disrepair, operating on razor-thin margins, with workers whose wages keep them at the edge of poverty. This is not only a profound moral failure, it is also a profound economic failure. A lack of affordable child care has contributed to the decline in prime-age labor force participation, especially among mothers. One study found that from 2018 to 2019, 2 million parents of young children had to quit a job, not take a job, or greatly change their job because of problems with childcare. For these reasons, Build Back Better finally treats the work of caring for families as what it is, not some social issue separate and apart from building a strong economy, but as the foundation of a strong economy. It not only ensures older Americans have access to good home care, it invests deeply in young families. The bill ensures access to high-quality childcare, in part by incentivizing workplaces to build daycare centers. And it puts a cap on how much families pay for it. Right now, the average family has to spend about 13% of their income on childcare, more than they spend on food. Build Back Better would cap the cost at 7%. It also guarantees universal pre-K for every child. 13 years of schooling, K through 12, has been the norm for 90 years. Now we're giving families the ability to sign their 3- and 4-year-olds up for 2 more years. Another way it improves care, albeit indirectly, is by extending the expanded child tax credit, which provides 39 million households up to $3,600 in tax cuts per child. The bill also permanently makes the child tax credit fully refundable, meaning that the neediest families will continue to receive the full child tax credit over the long run. The third way Build Back Better makes history is climate. These bills are our country's largest ever investment in reducing carbon emissions. The reconciliation bill alone contains more than $500 billion to green our economy, while the infrastructure bill includes funding for major projects, like dotting the American landscape with 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. We think it will accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in the same way that the building of gas stations enabled cross-country travel. That's not to say Build Back Better will solve climate change, full stop, or that it's the final word on how this administration will fight climate change. It isn't. But as far as first steps go, these are giant leaps. Altogether, Build Back Better will prevent an enormous amount of carbon from being pumped into the air. More carbon we project than the Amazon rainforest sucks out of the atmosphere each year. Our goal is to halve U.S. emissions by 2030, and these investments, we think, will get us a significant part of the way there. The fourth history-making measure is how we pay for the previous 3. Build Back Better is one of the most significant tax reforms of the past half-century. It makes our tax system much fairer, in large part through a focus on compliance. America effectively has 2 tax systems, one for the wealthy and one for everyone else. The vast majority of Americans already pay what they owe because they get a W-2. The employer sends the IRS the same form it sends employees. Taxes are deducted from paychecks, and employees pay what they owe. But for the wealthiest Americans who aren't wage or salary workers and earn income via opaque ways like proprietorships, the tax system is essentially an honor system. The government doesn't have the equivalent of a W-2 to verify that they're paying their full bill. This is a large part of the reason that 15% of taxes owed to the federal government are not collected. We had expected that over the next decade, $7 trillion would fall through the cracks of our tax system in this way. But Build Back Better includes $80 billion so the IRS can go after wealthy tax evaders.
I'm Bernard Malamud, an emeritus professor of economics at UNLV. Secretary Yellen, while you were vice chair and chair of the Federal Reserve, heroic easy money policies lifted the economy out of its long slump. At the same time, they buoyed financial markets. Stock prices about doubled. Wealth inequality increased. This combination of easy money, rising asset values, and increased wealth inequality has continued with the Fed's response to the pandemic. With this in mind, what do you think of proposals for a wealth tax, advanced, for example, by Berkeley economists Emmanuel Says and Gabriel Zussman?
Well, those specific proposals did not make it into the bill. The bill does make the tax code substantially more progressive. Our compliance efforts to ensure wealthy people pay what they owe will raise an estimated $400 billion. And that's probably a conservative projection. Another $400 billion will come from closing loopholes utilized by wealthy taxpayers, and another $200 billion through a surtax on the country's highest earners, people making more than $10 million a year. All told, we expect the revenue-raising and savings provisions in the plan to generate more than $2 trillion. And they do that without raising taxes on those making less than $400,000 a year at all. In many cases, people will see a tax cut. An important piece of the $2 trillion will come from what I consider to be the fifth and final historic aspect of Build Back Better. It includes the most significant international economic agreements so far this century. More than 130 countries, representing nearly 95% of global GDP, have now agreed to change how multinational corporations are taxed, in part by imposing a minimum tax on their foreign earnings. Build Back Better would ensure that agreement is reflected in U.S. law. Our international tax system is long overdue for an update. It was designed for the global economy as it existed in the 1920s. And since then, tax competition among nations has created a bigger-than-neighbor approach to government policy, where working and middle-class people around the world lose. It works like this. In an attempt to lure production and business to our shores, countries, including the United States, lower corporate rates. But that tactic has a fundamental flaw. When America lowers its rates for the purpose of attracting business, other nations see it. They can lower their rates in response to undercut us, and they have. In this way, we become trapped in a global race to the bottom to see who can lower their corporate taxes further and faster. The U.S. has not won this race. Not only do lower corporate rates ultimately fail to attract businesses, they erode our tax base, leaving us less revenue to invest in the core ingredients of economic growth: infrastructure, childcare, R&D. The new tax deal pulls the United States out of this race to the bottom and enters us into a new and more productive form of competition. With a global minimum tax of at least 15%, there's no incentive left for nations to try to undercut each other. Instead, nations will be forced to compete on the real metrics of a strong economy: who has the most skilled workers, the strongest infrastructure, the most cutting-edge R&D.
My name is Peter Grema, and I'm a senior here at UNLV majoring in economics and real estate. Secretary Yellen, what can the Biden administration do to address the wealth gap and narrow it here in the United States? Can wealth be measured with sufficient accuracy? Will the agreement by 140 countries for a corporate global minimum tax rate of 15% help alleviate some of the wealth disparities we see here at home today?
Well, Peter, the answer is a definite yes, because these new competitions are ones we can win. And the revenue we generate from this tax will be reinvested in all the programs I described today to help working families. So these are the 5 ways Build Back Better makes economic history. The bills contain, first, the biggest investment in modernizing American infrastructure since Eisenhower and the interstate. Second, a revolution in how we care for our children. Third, the country's largest ever investment in fighting climate change. Fourth, one of the 2 or 3 most consequential tax reforms of the past 50 years. And fifth, an historic overhaul of the international tax system. Any one of these measures would reorient our medium to long-term economic outlook in a much more positive direction. But together they do something far more transformative.
Hi, my name is Amir Malikov, and I'm an economics professor here at the Lee Business School. Secretary Yellen, the United States is currently experiencing a surge in labor productivity. This is welcome news for many reasons, among which are its implications for wage growth. Now, the obvious concern is that this might just be a blip, because it's common to see a bounce in productivity at the end of recessions. In fact, it happened following the Great Recession, and the accelerated productivity growth, which we observed then, was short-lived and faded away quickly. Are you optimistic that this time is going to be different, and that we will be able to sustain high rates of productivity growth, at least in the medium term? If you could please speak to these issues and perhaps to the ability of the infrastructure bill and the proposed Build Back Better Act to help the U.S. avoid the return to anemic productivity growth it experienced since mid-2000s. Thank you.
Well, a few weeks ago, I would not have been as certain, but to answer the question, I am optimistic now. I do believe that the passage of these pieces of legislation will not only lead to higher rates of productivity, but to positive changes across a wide array of metrics. They will increase the size of our labor force and expand the productive capacity of our economy. These investments, we expect, will lead to a GDP increase over the long term without increasing the national debt or deficit by $1. In fact, the offsets in these bills mean they actually reduce annual deficits on net over time. But more important than what Build Back Better will do to macroeconomic measures is what these new laws will do to the economy as people experience it every day. About this time 40 years ago, I had just started returning to work after my husband and I had our son. And I think about couples that are in a similar position right now and what these bills might mean for them. They'll be able to find great childcare and spend far less of their budget on it. In a few years, their kids can enter a good free preschool, which we know confers all sorts of benefits to kids later in life. Kids who attend pre-K tend to do better in later grades. They're more likely to graduate high school and college and find higher paying jobs once they do. And those kids will live in a world where climate change is not as urgent a crisis as it is today, because we made the investment to keep Earth a livable, thriving place. More than anything else, government officials tend to invoke future generations, our children and grandchildren, as their reasons for doing things. And I don't think it's controversial to say that today many young people greet those sentiments with an eye roll. There's a broad feeling that past generations, having climbed the ladder, pulled it up behind them. That's the feeling, at least, and I don't think it's entirely unwarranted. But I do hope that these twin laws in time render it somewhat diminished. I hope the students of UNLV and young people across this country come to see Build Back Better for what it is, an attempt to pass forward an economy and a country with strong foundations, and that it made that generational handoff with some measure of success. Thank you very much for having me.